Oh, no. Trying to be I agree with that.
Oh, since they bought it.
Lincoln, where did Jennifer get to? Is she on vacation?
Yeah, she's out this week. I think she was going down to Charleston, Savannah, so doing a southern tour.
Did I tell you I met over in Luray, one of your classmates in law school?
Pardon me?
I met one of your classmates in law school.
Yeah, we were together at the
We were talking one day and he was saying he works in
for the whole summer.
you guys about the same age? No. He said, yeah, we went to graduate law school together. I was like, okay.
He's very,
Yeah, I've actually known for about 10 years. Just kind of putting it together. UC Davis. He was in California for a long time. Yeah, I told him. I said, see you regularly. I can get it for you.
could you and him send it to me?
Yeah, I'll get it for you.
Sorry, man, I was set up here.
Alrighty, thanks everybody for coming. Jennifer is out of town this week, so she did help prepare things, but she'll be back for our next meeting. I'll just go over the agenda. I think we can probably move through tonight fairly quick, hopefully. I don't have a lot, some things on the item number 3, this initial discussion of land use, environment, and community design. We can talk about this, but tonight I thought we would try to finish up on our housing goals, objectives, and maybe strategies. Then move on to the looking at doing an initial review of land use, just to review the process. So far, we have completed, analyzing demographic information, some economic, housing data, growth. We've kind of gone through that, and Jennifer will be putting that together in the comprehensive plan, sort of the preamble. So now our task tonight is to try to, I think one of the more important parts of the plan, seems, at least as we think about the future, is housing. We all need a place to live. So what I'll do is just a quick review, is remember that we did come to a consensus that we did a really good job of coming to a draft vision statement, and just to review that from last time. I won't read it all, but that's what we had come to a conclusion on. I think it encompasses a lot of things, a little bit of an expansion from the last one, but still, I think for the one that was created in 2018, I think it still hits on a lot of the major themes as we contemplate what we would think Madison would be like or look like in, say, another 20 years. I do have the workbook, or the PDF I sent you that was fillable. I learned how to do it the other day. So everything now that I do is fillable and has links on it, starting as of last week. So if we look at the survey, we did these sort of bullet points and ideas are taken from the survey that we did. I think we got about 9 or 10 responses, which is not a lot, but it's also taking into consideration the comments that were made in the last work session. You can read these. Just some of the important, what appears to be important. I'll just, I think everyone agreed, at least, that rental inventory options need to be increased. Home ownership. 100% indicated that new housing. Again, these are not a lot of folks, but I think most that came probably filled it out. 100% of the survey that Jennifer put together indicate that new housing, along with associated development, should be directed toward existing or planned service districts, which may include the town of Madison and nearby village areas. Also, concerns was expressed the town of Madison may have policy discourages or prohibits various types of housing presented in the survey. Because I think most of we'll look at this, we'll look at the land use, but most of the available sort of raw land for potential housing, even though I think we've sort of all agree we don't have a massive housing demand, but if things do change, or if there were to be new housing, new rooftops, that there are areas that would be appropriate, and that would be on public utilities. This one right here, 7%, so 7 out of 10 or so that responded indicate that accessory dwelling units, pocket neighborhoods, traditional village development may work as innovative solutions if it can be adapted to enhance and complement the existing nature of Madison County. However, concerns were expressed that goals in our policy should be proactive regarding management, not about encouraging growth. So, I don't know, I'll just type this and save this as a copy, that for a group copy. Are there any comments or thoughts or anything you want to add to sort of?
How many folks got the survey?
I've sent it out. I just kept it to, we'll go out to a larger public at some point, but it was pretty much just everyone in this room, so I think whatever 18, 19 people were on that group.
Again?
Yes, sir.
Could you go back to the vision slide? It looked to me like your second paragraph was intended to be your first paragraph, and the first paragraph was intended to be the second paragraph.
Good point. Yes. Thank you. So just looking at the survey, and again, this is also taken in as comments that we compiled, when we met last month. Is there anything you want to add here, or anything to add, Faye?
I have a question, or something you said earlier, it doesn't necessarily go here at all. You made a statement as you were going through the things that we filled out, something about there doesn't seem to be much demand, is that the word you use for rental in this county?
As far as, I guess I'm maybe said it, there seems to be a lot of demand for rental, at least anecdotally. As far as new housing, the demand for, 20, hundreds of houses, I guess what I'm trying to say, is not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a very kind of narrow, small area that could potentially, be an area for new housing, but I don't think our data shows us that there's a need for hundreds of new housing, units.
No, and I'm not suggesting that at all, but I'm thinking for rentals. And in Madison County, a lot of what, in a small area like this, you do it word of mouth. You may look at some of the, wherever else they list rentals. I guess I'm looking at it a little more practically, like if I were looking for a rental. They don't look for this, like in a town, I know how they rent in cities, how you find rentals, all over with these apps and all that. We don't do that in Madison County, and I think saying that we don't have a need, if it's as small as just rentals, I'm not sure how you measure that right now. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think we would ever expect with 13,000 residents here, we're ever going to see the demand for it. We're going to see it, but we're going to be wanting to buy all our land up.
What happens is your folks who are seeking rentals, because when we first moved here, we looked for a rental in Madison. This is where we wanted to be. And as you look around, there's nothing listed on any of the sites, like you say. And if you call one of the local agents, they want to really find out who you are before they'll even talk to you to recommend somebody. But I have a sneaky suspicion that if you already live here and you need a rental and you start talking to folks, you'll find one. So you're right. So the question really becomes is, do you want to create policies that encourage other folks to, folks to advertise their rentals or be inviting to folks from other places? And, it's kind of something that we need to decide as a community. Because you're right, they're there, but you don't know it.
No, you don't know it. And the other thing I do know for a fact, just from a few people that I know, some people that I know, it's like talking about businesses and small businesses and all that. A lot of people in this county do not want them advertised because they don't want Big Brother looking down on them. And I know rentals right now that are rented privately. They never go through, they never go on the market. You never will see them listed. You will never see them in any newspaper. They will never be listed with a real estate agent. They're rented. And I said word of mouth. If you knew somebody, then you pick that up as soon as somebody leaves. I think we just need to be careful that we're pretending we don't have a problem when we do. As far as like knowing the new teacher this year, that when I asked him about it last fall, he looked here and there was nothing he could, like you said, nothing advertised, whatever. He went straight down to Green, and that's what he could afford, and that's where he lives. Right now, he would love to be here for every reason you can think of. But he can't rent here because he's by himself and he can't afford. Like I saw that farmhouse a couple days ago that's been renovated, $2,550. I think that's great, but that person's going to be buying a house soon or whatever, which is fine too. But I just don't want to let us get lulled into, apathy because I don't think we have a problem.
Well, I think that the fact that, my personal opinion is, and it's kind of the same way in Luray and Page County, is you can rent it through word of mouth. You don't have to open it up to a broader, market. And that to me sort of speaks to the fact that the demand is high and the inventory is low. If you can just do that, hey, just tell a couple people next thing you know. So that just sort of speaks to, and I think that probably speaks to that more than anything.
Lincoln, I have tried to rent a house to people who were in transition, like this gentleman up in the front row. I'm not sure I know your name. But you
Alan.
came here, what's your name?
My name's Alan.
Alan, my name's Larry. I tried NGIC. I tried to find people who were coming to work at NGIC. I didn't know who the contact person was at NGIC. I never did find out who the contact person was there. But I have neighbors who work there, okay? I've had people rent my house for a few months because they were building. They were moving here, they were building. And so they wanted a place to rent for a few months, okay? I've rented for years, but the problem is the network, okay? People, landlords, private landlords who are looking for good tenants don't have a network to work from other than Facebook or a newspaper, really, because you can't find a realtor who will deal with that. Realtors don't want to deal with rentals. So most of my rentals have happened through Airbnb, and it's people who can afford to do that. You know, the fees are phenomenal, but it's a furnished house, you know. Traveling nurses, those people, you don't get very many of them because the hospitals are so far away. But I think it's more the network than it is anything else. And local people, or people who, I hate to say local people, I don't like that term.
No,
But people who have been here for a while and have a house to rent, they know that the way to rent it is to mention it to their neighbor, or to mention it. That's the only way you get the word out, really. So, I mean, I don't think it's a problem with finding the rental. I think it's a problem with finding the tenant.
Lynn, it seems like so much of what we're dealing with here is trying to figure out how many of various things, like how many people are looking for a rental, how many people are looking for senior housing. How do we get that information? I mean, I know there's some things in here suggesting committees and groups, but it seems like that's the idea. It's how do we get that information? Are we making a mountain out of a molehill, or vice versa?
I mean, how do we, I mean, you know, I think we have pretty good data as far as what our, you know, what our vacancy rate is. You know, we can look and see what are the rental options. I mean, I think we probably all agree that, like we said, most are sort of, and everyone seems to suggest that. And again, it's similar in a lot of regions, is most of the rental properties are indeed word of mouth, which, as I said before, I think indicates that there's probably a high demand. So looking at all the data we've looked at in conversations, I mean, I would just say there is a deficit of rental properties, period. You know, now how do we?
We don't know how much.
Right. I mean, what would satisfy that need? Well, we haven't reached it, whatever it may be, you know, so.
We're in a spillover environment. And basically what happens, it starts all the way in Northern Virginia, and when the rental rates go to $3,500 to $4,500 a month, they spill over to Fauquier, then they spill over to Culpeper, then they spill over to Madison. The need for additional rentals is clear when your rental rates will jump from $600 to $800 a month to $1,200 to $1,400 overnight, which is what they've done. So if there's an empty house, in my experience, even before the house is empty, there are people seeking out the owners and calling you to see when they can move into that house. You don't have to advertise. You don't even. It doesn't even have to cross your mind. You got people chasing you down to come rent it. So
Sometimes it is just vacant. Yeah, right,
You have people,
right, exactly,
you know,
right.
checking with you to see when they can move in, what they're going to do. So it's there's supply and demand.
There's also a large number of your cheaper houses in Madison, your rental type houses, that's taken by Section 8. You would be surprised the amount of people that have their houses rented through Section 8 because they know they're going to get their money.
you.
And it's a lot of them. I know a lot of people that own a lot of rentals that have them through Section 8.
Can we find that information? Is that
I
something?
know that.
You do know it?
It's 19.
Well, that's not very many.
We've got 19 vouchers.
Thank you.
And a big waiting list.
Oh, a huge wait.
Yeah, I know. Huge
We
wait.
got 400 on the waiting list.
That's what I was gonna ask.
See, that's the kind of information. The other thing,
Right, Peter?
like your school system, if you could somehow survey, and they'd be willing to do it somehow or know, how many of our teachers and our other larger employers have to bring in, they can't, it's because they can't rent here. In other words, they live out, not because they necessarily want to, but because, that would give you some idea of the scope of this thing. So,
Let me be clear, the 400 that are on the waiting list would be, Skyline Cap covers Madison, Orange, and Green. So people just apply for a voucher, and if they could get into Madison, they would get a voucher in Madison, or if it's Green, and they go to Green.
so is it 19 Madison vouchers?
Right.
What's also affecting the rental market is over the course of the last couple of years, a lot of the more modest homes that have been rentals in the past have now been ceded to flippers. And they're buying the houses, they're tuning them up, they can make 50 or 75 grand and flip the house. So
Don't forget the short-term rentals.
Bill, short-term rentals, but those houses are disappearing off the market. Continue to press the demand upwards.
So, Ligon, let me ask questions. So, the second paragraph up above right there, you're talking about 100% indicated that new housing along with associated developments should be directed towards existing or planned service districts, which may include blah, blah, blah. Well, I can't say that we have existing and planned service districts, so I might be jumping ahead, but at some point, this group is going to identify areas of the county that we feel like would be, what am I trying to say?
That's right.
Acceptable, would be desirable to do this?
Yeah, we'll look at it tonight, actually, if we
Oh, okay,
have a little bit.
all right.
So-
Excuse me, we're looking for low-income rentals, is that what we're looking for?
I mean, I don't know, look, we're just brainstorming about ideas to maybe, when we get these goals and objectives, increase the potential for rental properties.
I just wonder, the people who are seeking rentals, who are they? Are they people who want to work here? Are they people who want to work somewhere else? Are they people who want to work from home? Do they want to work? There are a whole lot of questions about that. And it seems like the focus is on long-term rentals, whereas short-term rentals improve your neighborhood and build revenue, whereas long-term rentals do not. Generally. I've had several long-term tenants, and I can maybe point to two who were really good tenants. The question is, why is that? Why are you looking at that first?
Well, I mean, we're not necessarily looking at, this is
There were
just,
jobs here, maybe people would want to come and rent and work here. But I just don't understand why you put the cart before the horse.
I really haven't tried to put anything before anything, just sort of got into the rental conversation. I mean, that's one part of it. It seems to be and again, just looking at the survey and just through conversations that we've had, it seems everyone sort of seems to agree that there's a lack of rental property. I mean, so that's why we
Okay.
have focused on that.
Except that the infrastructure isn't there for them.
No.
Okay, we don't even have all the infrastructure for the houses that are here. Internet, for example, sewage, water, those things, we don't have those things for existing homes. So why are we looking at more homes?
Y'all want to go home?
You don't have an answer for it?
I mean, again, the rental is a portion of it. We don't have existing infrastructure. I mean, I would argue that to a certain degree, yes and no, but it's still, I'll keep it kind of simple. we seem to all agree we don't have enough rental properties for the folks who live in Madison County. Can some of them be from other places?
I have a question about that.
Potentially, yeah.
What policy changes would you propose, and there's a lot of planning commission folks here for it, that the county could take, that if you wanted to increase your rental homes, what policies would you even enact in order to
Right.
enact that?
Well, I think maybe the best thing for us to do so we can, is to stay on this kind of, these goals, objectives that we sort of had put together, Jennifer and I. A lot of Jennifer, and I even came up with a few strategies on my own that we can look at.
Yeah, let's go through that stuff first and then come back, huh?
Yeah, let me,
Yeah, we get sidetracked by, I mean, it's almost a reflex to say we need more affordable housing, we need more rental housing, and yet when we look at, well, for example, we have right now, I think, maybe one company that's interested in developing one-bedroom apartments, a small group of them.
Right.
Not correct. And that's been in the process for like 40 years. And there's not, the people that would build these things don't see the demand, otherwise they would be here.
yeah, I think that's a good point.
And very few people are going to build a house on spec as a rental house. I don't think that happens very often either.
So if we look at the goal to, and again, if you looked at the other comp plans, which I encourage, they kind of, there's a lot of platitudes, and you sort of say the same thing, you throw it down on paper, and you go to the next, and to a certain degree, I mean, we're all sort of do that, and it doesn't mean you're not sincere about it, it just, the idea is to, I like for us to be as thoughtful as possible. So I just put as a goal, I think it's a goal that, again, that we sort of, from talking to the people in the group and the survey, consider a mix of housing option that preserves and enhances the rural character of Madison County and the quality of life for Madison residents. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. So how do we do this? You can see explore, consider housing, and land use policies, best use to integrate conservation and preservation of natural open space. Consider housing models that reduce negative impacts on environment and agricultural activities. Consider regional development mixed-use policy that strengthens and directs development towards existing planned utility service districts, established villages in the town of Madison. When I looked at this and looked at some, and we can, pick your brains on this, but this is sort of what I again, fairly boilerplate here. I think these are good objectives. So this is what I sort of went through and, I sent this to everyone, I guess, a few days ago. I looked at maybe some strategies. If we do goals, objectives, we just write out maybe a list of some strategies that could be, contemplated. Yes, okay.
So, I'm Anne Marie Bach, and I've never been to one of these meetings before. But I really have been watching other areas around the country and how they're developing. And I think that the power of the committee has to really look further than 20 years. I would really propose that I would like to see us think what Madison County needs to look like, or we'd like it to look like in 100 years. Because really 20 years is too short. It's a short-term view. We really need to really expand our vision, and that's the power of the comp plan and the power of this committee. And then the Board of Supervisors has the power of zoning and the power of allocation of the fund. But I don't think we have enough vision yet. I would like to see it expand. I would like to see a map of all the agricultural land. I want to see like soil maps. And
We got that coming.
Perfect. I want to say like these fields are super important for the Madison County growth in 100 years. Because I want my children's children to be able to look out and be able to farm, or to be able to hunt, or be able to walk through the woods. And I see it in every county around us. It's coming. And if we don't plan ahead, we're gonna miss it. And we're gonna, So I would propose that if we really value those things, like agricultural land and green space, open space, that the only way to do that is put a dollar figure on it. So if you value certain plots of land, then you say, if you want to build housing on you gotta pay a big penalty. And once you build a house on that field, you're never gonna farm it again, ever. So monetize, put a penalty on it. If they want to go ahead and build on that really prime piece of land, that money goes toward green space, parks, goes right back into our funding, and we can fund some kind of really important green space. If somebody wants to build in the town of Madison, in those zones that the committee deems are really important to build on, they get a benefit. They don't get that penalty, they get a kickback. So really you have to say, use your power, use zoning, use allocation of funds. Put a dollar figure on that prime piece of, forested land that's never been cut or hasn't been cut for 200 years and say, if you want to cut it down and clear cut it, it's gonna cost you, because that's really important for Madison County. I don't know, that's my feel, but I also have seen lots of plans with all kinds of topographic maps and green space, by each property owner that they allocate, what's important, and then you can identify those areas, wetlands, stuff like that. Go ahead. So that's mine. Thank you for hearing me.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Just following up on that, I think that's an interesting idea. The problem is that if you look at the situation today, everybody knows, as the survey indicates, that we have a dearth of affordable housing for various populations. Young people, seniors, people with families, and so forth. We don't have any way of measuring how many people living in the county now are paying more than 30% of their household income for housing. We don't have the answers to a whole lot of questions. One of those questions is, knowing what is self-evident to everybody around here, that presumptively, a lot of people in the county are paying more than 30% for housing. Why aren't we seeing people, developers, others, coming into the county and trying to fill those needs? And that's one of a number of questions that I think your survey results raise. We know there's a problem just because we feel there's a problem, but we don't have a lot of data on the nature of that problem, and we don't have we don't have answers to questions. Another question is, assuming that there is a whole range, income range and age range of people who are paying more than 30%, seniors, young people just out of high school, et cetera, et cetera. Assuming that, whom do we prioritize? What group is most important? Because we're not going to have an immediate income impact across the board. Should we be trying to prioritize one group and try to work towards satisfying that need? But just an answer to the young lady's question. I think it's a very good point, but we don't know the answer, at least I don't know the answer to why developers are not interested when just to take one example, when we were discussing land just north of the Food Lion on 29 a year or so ago, and the Planning Commission, Bill Gentry, a well-known local realtor, told us that contrary to Carlisle's assumption and a lot of our assumptions, there wasn't anybody that wanted to develop that for senior housing, for multifamily senior housing. And the question is, why not? We don't have an answer.
I mean, some of that is just the reality of construction. If you use that 30% to try to get to something that's gonna be affordable, how do you do that with building costs being what they are, land costs? And that's, I'm sure, a lot of the issue. I would think it would be.
Excuse me.
Frank?
Go ahead, Frank.
And to throw another, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, with the ideas that you presented, whatever, we don't have any control over who's going to be selling land. That's my biggest issue right now, or not issue, concern, just because I'm concerned. Our farmers, our people who own land in this county around me, in my little rural district versus others, they're selling. They're older. They've got to get rid of it. They don't, a lot of us, it can't matter anymore what it's for. It can't matter. We just need dollars. I'm old. I need dollars to take care of me for the rest of my life if I don't have enough. So my farm may go up to the highest bidder if it ever were not to be farmed. I don't want to see that, but I'm probably not going to be in control of it. Bottom line is, we have a lot of people. I'm amazed every time I take another road down to, and I did one the other day and ended up not where I expected to be, but I had time, so it was okay. Down toward, ended up on 231 South. But I was amazed. I didn't know where all these houses were. There were little houses everywhere. Not little, so big, some of them many big. And they were everywhere, little lanes tucked away and played by you. You know where they were. I see them all the time. People are selling land, and the best they can do is sell 3 acres or 10 acres or whatever they're going to sell it. And they sell it on the edge of their property so it won't disturb their farm if they're still farming it or whatever. We've always had the attitude, or at least some of us do, that the landowner property rights is pretty important. But we're not going to be able to control that. And these groups that are coming in or trying to come in, buying up our chunks of big land when they can, it's very concerning for me. And we don't have any control over that. People say to me, why don't you just stop it? We can't stop it. They're going to sell it. And some of them, it's just crazy. So, I mean, I think we cannot leave that out of the discussion if we start talking about our dreams and ideals about what we want to see. I cannot do that.
We can't leave out of the discussion either what we discussed in the first meeting, the age of our population that's living here in Madison. It's a huge, because our population here in Madison's older. And so who's going to be here when that population, if there's not options for our younger generation? But I also think that there are some great questions for 2 people here who actually do housing and building that could probably be answered and give us a greater insight of what's happening around us and what's happening in the county. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I don't mind.
Yes, please, share.
Okay.
I see you know.
There's a couple things here. Our 4 and 10 zoning rule, our time-based zoning, is the biggest thing that we have that will kill a farmer. Okay, you got 300 acres or 200 acres, you can make 3 lots. If grandma or grandpa goes into the nursing home, you can pay for 3 years for them to stay there. And then the 4th time, you can't sell no more land. So what you gonna do? You're gonna have to get a reverse mortgage, or you're gonna have to sell the farm. That is a horrible thing, and I spoke against it when we moved from 4 years to 10 years. Will be very harmful to our farmers going forward forever. The other thing about development, this is an incredibly tough county to develop in. The 3-acre zoning pretty much means you can't afford to put a state road on it because the state road costs too much. The land value, underlying land values are high because of a shortage of available land. So the land value is high, the road cost is high. You can't have smaller lots to get more density. So basically what you're stuck with is the numbers don't work. So developers don't come when the numbers don't work. We don't have any available sewer and water infrastructure for denser zoning. We need denser zoning to build apartments or townhouses or whatever it is in order to have that land value be affordable. Of course, our construction costs are very high right now, but the development infrastructure costs are astronomical. And without water and sewer, you will never accommodate the folks that have the most difficulty getting affordable housing. It's just not going to come. And our need is everywhere, on every income level. People can't buy what they want to live in. When you start talking about building a house that's 1,700 or 1,800 square feet, and that house costs $550,000, the only people that are going to afford it are somebody who's coming from a higher wage area to our area. We already have police and firefighters and others from other localities living here, but our land values have gone up so quickly that those folks are being forced into other counties right now to look around to try to find something more affordable in a county. Say, even though the taxes are higher in Greene, you can get a smaller lot and you can afford more in Greene than you can in Madison. Madison is one of the highest areas around to buy a lot in. And you just can't make normal subdivisions. You know, it's very difficult. So hopefully that helps somebody.
Can I say something? Right now, Madison is uniquely positioned to be the farming and tourist county in the region, okay? Because we have all that open space, we have all those farms, we have all those people interested in short-term rentals. If we had more focus on the kind of economic development we wanted to do, agriculture and tourism, and support services for those two ventures, then everything else would fall into place. But we don't focus our economic development. We got a damn vaping store down the road, you know. I mean, that's not going to create jobs, okay? If you want something like that, have a micro business and do it on the internet. But support businesses. We don't have a Tractor Supply. I'm not talking about Tractor Supply the store. I'm talking about somebody who works on tractors or sells tractors, or somebody who helps the tourism industry, the service industry. There's all kinds of businesses that would support that. But we don't focus our economic development. And you know what? If we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to be like every other county, okay? Right now, we are uniquely positioned to draw people for revenue from other counties and DC. Okay, when somebody down the road from me says, I have an Airbnb rental and I'm worried about the competition, I'm thinking, you are never going to run out of customers.
No.
You're never going to run out of people to come and stay in that rental. And I need people to clean. Linen service would be really nice. Delivery services would be really nice.
We have linen service.
Wine tour, I meant to talk to you about that. Wine tours, okay? All these other events that people want to do to get away. You have the county for it. And there's not one county around us that's like that. So, I mean, I just don't get it. I don't know. You're talking about we need more places for people to live. If you had an economic focus, everything else would follow.
May I just clear up one question, Larry? I'm not sure. When you mentioned agriculture, what are you thinking?
All kinds of agriculture, you know, vegetables, livestock, vineyards, small farms. There are people who own 3 acres who ought to be considered a small farm. You can raise a ton of rabbits on 3 acres. And you know what? People are going to want food. They already want it. You know, if you're talking about the high price of land, have you been to the grocery store lately? Farmers can sell off of their farm now, and our farmers market is the worst in the region. It used to be pretty good, but there was price fixing there, which was ridiculous. I mean, people just aren't thinking about this. We got two livestock markets here. And all the guys who come in to haul those livestock, they probably need somebody to work on their truck every now and then. They probably need all kinds of services. And we're missing the boat because our economic development is floundering.
Well, we've got a lot of applications for tourism and associated business, so I would argue differently, but I understand. I mean,
Farming, I have to, and Clay, you talk to farmers all the time. You know every one of them in the town, in the county. I know when I talk to Brad, how much does a farmer make a year? I can show you my Schedule F. Jeff has enough deductions to last his whole entire lifetime because of what he's had to buy to farm 80 acres.
I have a good job so I can afford to farm because I love to farm.
And that was my husband.
And I make money building houses so I can play on the farm.
That's what my husband did. That's what Jeff is doing, my son, who took it over. And I mean to tell you, there is no money on the small guy, and even the big guys, like our people that own a lot of it, they work themselves to death. It's a 24/7 job, and young people, it's hard for them to go in, and we're all worried about some of our friends and children of some of our friends who are into this right now, and there is no way. I don't know how in the world they can afford it.
It's not just the big farms.
But they've got to have a want to do it. They've got to be able to do it, and there's just so many. It sounds easy to say, but
yeah,
it's not.
we are going to do we'll have a little plan section just on economic development and tourism. So let's try to focus right now,
Yes.
because they're charging me to write a comprehensive plan. And I want to try.
Well, this is
So,
part of the comprehensive plan.
yeah, it is, but I think there's maybe a better places. So we're looking at this goal. Let's try to knock to these goals. Consider a mix of housing options that preserve, enhance rural character of Madison County, quality of life for Madison residents. I think that's something that we can all kind of get behind. Some of the objectives, I don't know if all of them are as clear. Some of the objectives might actually be able to be merged with some of the, if you look down here, potential strategies. Explore, consider housing options, land use policies, practices that integrate conservation and preservation, natural open spaces. I mean, we want, if there are new housing developments, and we've got a section on land use, we'll hopefully get here. We like to see it, I think that to me, that suggests we like to see it maybe in areas that are close to the town on public utilities. Consider housing models that reduce negative impacts on the environment, ag activities.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I'm a little, that was one of Jennifer's, but if we go down to some of the strategies, consider residential mixed-use policy that strengthen and direct developments toward existing planned utility service districts, established village, and the town of Madison. Now, these strategies, I think, are pretty good. I wrote these, and they're also AI generated. Well, I'm a big believer it actually was a really helpful tool. There's not one of these things that I just put in and I use it, manipulate it, put my thoughts into it. But I think it's good because it is drawing from a very broad base of sort of knowledge. And then I sort of take it and sort of, okay, how can I rearrange this? And sometimes just take out things. So, you can't mess with the computer. So this is kind of what we came up with, and what I sort of, again, I sort of took it, edited it, but encourage preservation of agricultural and open space designed for residential areas for agricultural conservation. I think that could be an objective. It also ties into our land use map a little bit. Go in here, collaborate with nonprofit organizations, land trusts, other stakeholders to develop policies to support reservation for agricultural land. We got Piedmont Environmental here, and open space. The partnership can leverage expertise, resources, and community support to achieve conservation goals. I'll finish these real quick. And again, I know you can read them. Continue to promote landowners, to inform landowners of the county, land use taxation policy to offer incentives to landowners who consider to conserve their land and use it for agricultural purposes. I think we've changed some land use policies recently that are fairly advantageous to our farmers, and just the existing land use program that we have in Virginia and Madison is probably the greatest single tool in the preservation of farmland that there probably is. So I don't think we're going to change a lot there, but I think this could be, again, a strategy or a goal. Now, here we get into the cluster. Consider adopting a cluster development ordinance that concentrates development in certain areas while leaving the remaining land agriculture use or open space. The approach reduces the overall footprint development and preserves agricultural land open space. That's what we talked about, the cluster development. I don't know where everyone falls out. We kind of looked at visuals last time, talked about that clustering as a potential, something maybe could be done by special use permit in certain designated areas. And the last one, encourage high-density development to be connected to public utilities close to town of Madison. Yes.
I would add one more line, is that if you could identify a map to those views, like you're driving down 29 and you have this view, and that view is iconic for Madison County, that you identify what that view is and put, like, that's valuable.
Right.
So you identify the areas not just for higher density housing, but you establish areas that this is really iconic Madison County. And you preserve that, like 29 corridor, the views from like 230, certain views of the mountains. You don't like say, okay, we're going to be okay with somebody building like, selling 200 acres and putting like high density housing, and then your view is wrecked and so not just identify vague, I would like to see identify specific. So.
I think kind of what I'm hearing, if I go to here, I'm going to go back and put some comments in. I think maybe identify.
I would say critical areas to maintain the character and quality of life of Madison County. So that you identify like 29 corridor mountains and Piedmont Hills.
Identify critical view sheds for.
View shed, something like that. So you say, this view, I love it every time I drive down 29.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
To add to that. Well, how could this one, how could we manipulate this or change this or?
You could say there are certain unique areas that we deem uniquely and critically valuable to the character of Madison County.
Yep.
That can be part of the goal,
That's a goal, yeah.
is to make sure
And then
that
identify
the
a map
language
that,
includes view shed.
yeah, view shed.
Lincoln, could I say something?
Yes, sir.
Lincoln,
You know,
go ahead.
if we put something to that effect in here, one of my big concerns is taking people's land rights.
Yes,
Mine too.
that's
You
exactly
you
it.
can't take people's land rights from them.
Cannot.
That's not right. And the problem you got, as I said on the planning commission and other people said on the planning commission,
Yes.
and you put that in there, and a guy comes in here and wants to develop something, the first thing that someone from the audience is gonna say to the planning commission, your goals and objectives says this is a view shed, you can't build here. And you're taking that guy's land rights. I got a real issue with that.
I would add to that, Pete, that anybody who's got something existing would certainly fall under a grandfathered thing. And if you were buying land for a purpose, you'd have to consider, something new. But if you already owned it, I don't see where you could.
You wouldn't be giving up subdivision rights or yeah.
Or any of the existing development, you'd have to fall under a grandfathered clause.
And again, it's just,
You're gonna fall under.
right.
This is what your comp plan says, and we
Sure.
want you doing this in this area.
But
It's
remember,
gonna be brought up to us immediately.
I mean,
Fair
So
enough.
how do you balance that?
Now, that's a good question,
That's a
ma'am.
good
I didn't say I could answer your
And
question.
then do you compensate
Well, I think you-
for their unique piece of property?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe that land is worth,
You incentivize it.
yeah,
You
incentivize it
What money?
so that it stays.
But you can't take their development rights.
Well, you're talking about some sort of either impact fee or negative impact fee. So what happens with an impact fee if you're going to say, okay, you got to pay all this us money if you want to build something over here. What happens is the existing landowner who wants to sell his land, that fee that has to be paid is immediately taken out of what they will pay him for that property. So your existing citizen is the one who's penalized by the impact fee. Okay, and you got to be very careful with this. You know, you purchasing development rights or transferable development rights may have some merit if you're willing to sell them, if you can buy them back, if you sell them to create higher density in another location. But purchase development rights by the county is ludicrous because it eats your tax dollars up and you're not getting anything for it.
That's right.
So, I mean, this,
We're not doing that, we don't have the money for that.
my God, no, no kidding.
That's.
Well, I just put here, look, objective, identify critical view shed preservation.
No, you can't go down that path.
No.
I'm sorry.
No. This is
Where in
wrong.
Madison is not beautiful.
Yeah.
Where is it?
That's right.
I don't know, like, I can walk right out here, like 30 minutes ago when the sun was about, just going down.
Yes.
Beautiful, like breathtaking. Everywhere you go in Madison, you can't go down the view shed path. It's arbitrary and it doesn't, everything in Madison County is beautiful.
I think that's kind of why we left it off, because that is a good point.
But may I make one point before we move on? This is something that the board and the planning commission discussed. But the easiest way to create additional affordable housing in this county without, romancing developers and making major changes in the zoning ordinance is to focus initially on ADUs. ADUs are currently in use in the county. They're permitted in many instances. The Planning Commission and the board at one point considered expanding that and then sort of tabled it. But you don't have to have developers, you don't have to have radical changes in zoning, you don't have to have a lot of increased density. They're relatively cheap. Either building into a house or a granny pod that is somehow attached to the house, or a loft or barn or garage ADU. They aren't expensive. It would serve senior citizens. It would serve young people out of high school and college. And with proper controls, which we couldn't agree on when it was discussed, it is a very viable first step toward attacking this lack of affordable housing.
Can I say something here? So I think something was brought up early on about tenacity in Madison County. Maybe finding a place to live is the first test if you want to come. I don't know what this affordable housing, creating this housing for people, like the housing costs have skyrocketed, land values have skyrocketed. There's more permits being pulled now, I believe, than there were 3 years ago, 4, 5. All this stuff's going up and there's being more houses being built. Somebody's affording to build more houses here than they ever have before. And we're talking about making affordable housing. So we can build more houses again.
Well, I think Peter, in my humble opinion, has got it right. I mean, there's our ability from a governing standpoint and policy is fairly limited. We are building a lot of houses compared, but we know a lot of them, I think a fair amount of them are second homes, a fair amount of them out of town. There's still a niche that's there that's not being met. I don't think, what the size of it is, it's hard to really put, a number on it. I don't think it's huge because we're a small county. But I couldn't agree more with what Peter said, that when it comes to affordable that ADU, that potential to, we talked about in the smaller lots to maybe do, it would probably be about the simplest, most direct way to provide a niche that could kind of offer an option relatively affordable to a lot of folks.
And you have that, I believe that.
Yeah, that is in there. I mean, more than anything that we can talk about, in my opinion, that would be the one thing. Yeah.
Fundamental problem with ADUs is the urge to overregulate them. That is the fundamental problem. You have to allow flexibility. I agree with everything else. I agree with what Peter said. I agree with what you said, but don't try to overregulate them, limit the kind of rental they are, that sort of thing. As long as they meet the building code, I could support that. But when you start saying, well, you can only use it for this, this, and this, or, you take flexibility away from the owner. And you need flexibility to build a good market.
Okay, so,
C1 and A1, do they allow for the construction of an accessory dwelling unit?
so you can, but you have to be able to assign 3 acres to each unit. So your main house have to have, 3 acres.
But you can build in C1 and A1.
You could, if you have enough acreage.
Okay.
Which is already a unique sort of thing that Madison allows. A lot of communities.
So most of the county, you're permitted, in other words.
If you have that,
want it,
right.
Build it.
Right, but we sort of thought that the niche would be for those folks that maybe just have 3 acres but don't have 6. If they could potentially apply for a special use permit to do a ADU. So just for example, and so in a way, yeah, I agree, you don't want to overregulate it, but there are some, I think we would want to put certain, we talked through this thoroughly. I thought we had a pretty good set of reasonable regulations, so.
I have a editorial, be patient with me. I like the specific words. You've used consider multiple times in goals and objectives. I'm being picky here.
Sure.
Frankly, in terms of vocabulary, that's like saying, ask your mother. I think if it's important enough, if we agree with it, that it should be a goal, it should be a stronger word.
I agree.
There's an ambiguous word.
So either promote or just.
Recommend is the word.
Yeah, recommend, encourage, support, et cetera.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Consider is kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a thing that you see in a lot of.
I did it, that's.
No, it's not all AI generated, just a few things.
What if we're happy kicking the can down the road?
Yeah.
So, Legan, I've got one that's kind of specific. The objective, the first goal, explore and consider housing and land use policy best practices. That one you had up there. And to Anthony's point, I personally, I'm not speaking for the board now, I'm just speaking for me. I look at our villages and I would consider something along the lines of the Route 29 corridor study where right now, along those lines, we have, a mile on either side of 29 as we would look favorably upon rezoning those properties to business if somebody wanted to put business there. So, by the same token, I would go with, I would look favorably upon rezoning area within, whatever, around villages like Crigglesville, which is all A1, by the way, all A1. All you have to do is, if somebody came in to me right now and said, I'd like to take my 2 acres that it's right in the village of Crigglesville and rezone it to R1 or R2, I would say yes right away, because that's where the rooftops should be. And, it's zoned A1 only because I guess when we started zoning in 71 or whatever, everything was A1. Now you look on the GIS map and you look in Etland. I've got the lot next to me in Etlin is R1. There's a bunch of R1 and stuff in Etlin, but not in Crigglesville. Now, I have not done it for Brightwood, I've not done it for Rochelle and Rhoda and all that stuff, but I'm saying that one of their strategies would be to perhaps, I don't know how the wording would be, but to look favorably upon zoning our villages for residential as opposed to what's currently sitting there as agriculture. And then you could put, R2, you could put, 2 duplexes on an acre or so. Then it has something to do with the, public water and sewer, of course, too. So there's a lot of other stuff that plays in there. You might not have enough land to do it, but that's...
And also because your clusters.
Right.
In reducing A1, in A1, you have to have 3 acre split house. And that only incentivizes people to cut up their farmland.
That's right.
If you could put them closer together, if you have family or something and they wanted to have an acre each, when you start thinking about mowing 3 acres, let me tell you.
Yeah, so you cluster and rezone and away you go, if it's appropriate.
When we're doing all this talking about rental houses and affordability and all that kind of thing, when I'm sitting here thinking about this, I'm thinking about this affordable rentals and affordable housing being for Madisonians who have the need. Other people who come in would be secondary to me. The people that can afford the more expensive houses, they're going to pay to play. But if we're going to try to accommodate for affordable housing or affordable rentals, they should go first and foremost to our children, our grandchildren, the people who want to come back here that grew up here, or people who already live here that don't have to go out and seek somewhere else to live. So when I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about somebody's business where they're trying to make money. I'm talking about something to accommodate the people that should have the opportunity to live in their hometown.
And work.
Well, I was going to say,
If the work's available.
like school system's one of our biggest employers, and they can't live here. And I was going to say earlier before, I'm going to go ahead and head out, but so I've got concerts this week and one of them's tonight, one rehearsal. Anyway, I was thinking one of the goals that I see is the fact that I serve on the planning commission and do many other things with nonprofits and whatever in this county. It's because I'm serving the county and the people in the county and offering something that might be of use to them, protection as well as service in a way. And having some housing, and I'm thinking mainly, as I said, for our employers who have to bring people in, they don't make that much money, they cannot afford, don't know if they want to stay here. That would be a good reason for me to have affordable housing here, not necessarily for people to make money. That's not where I'm looking at it. So, anyway, I just think it's part of what we should be doing as a county.
I saw, just on the back side of what you're saying, I found this, it was a prototype of affordable housing that was approved in Seattle. And it was talking about things like, these apartments would be, and I'm trying to speak, I'm sorry. For our janitors, for our people that are working at 7-Eleven, affordable housing is not affordable if you're poor. I mean, you just can't, it doesn't happen. And so this prototype, which I loved, I thought it was awesome. It's like if no one pays more than 30% of their income. So everybody kind of has the same apartment, but it's tiered. So if this is how much you're making, because I don't know how many janitors we have in the county, and I don't know how many, but the teachers aren't making very much, really, either. Especially, I guess it's like an average of 50 grand a year, but that's still not like
60.
Is it 60? I thought it was 50.
It's changed. It's about 57 and some change.
Teaching at the wrong school.
Yeah, weren't we?
Yeah.
Ironically, for teachers, under the data that Lakin has distributed, the teachers are in the highest income class of
the county?
Of those classes that are shown in the
But there's
materials.
Compared to what?
That rolling scale rent is subsidized, and Madison County can't afford to subsidize it.
Well, and I'm sure Anthony will speak to this, and what I see, we sell a lot of real estate, and I see happening in the county a lot, is people that bought a house in the 70s and 80s in Northern Virginia, DC area, they want out of there now. They paid $200,000 for that house. Now it's worth $1.2 million. They can afford to come out here and buy a higher place land and build a high place house. But they don't want 3 acres, they want 10 or 15 or 20. And I'm sure you're seeing that a lot too. And we're seeing a lot of those people come to the county, like West Bush, you don't want to develop that. The guy over the road, look how many acres he coming by. Those people, they don't want to farm, they don't want to develop, they just won't want anybody close to them.
That's right.
This is not something new. This has been happening for.
But it's happening more and more.
But I think we have to pay attention to what's happening around us, right? Because we just had, I work at UVA, and we just had UVA buy 3 hospitals. And so and they're recruiting like crazy. And those doctors and those recruits they don't mind driving. And so that's what we're dealing with. Culpeper, Haymarket, Prince William. And so Madison's right in the middle of all of that.
Well, that's the tension between the two concepts that keeps coming up. Do we want to preserve the agricultural rural character, or do we want to go like Green and bring in more housing?
I think we've all been on the same page, we want to preserve it like it is.
When we start talking about the surrounding counties, they've chosen to build a population. Do we want to do that? We're getting attention here. Some people keep talking about more housing, more buildings, and some people keep talking about, in 100 years, I want to have my great-grandchildren be able to go out on the farm or walk through the woods. And those two things, unless you can satisfy that tension somehow, it's not an answer either way. The root of all
Need
these
to make a
money.
decent living.
Money.
That's never going to change.
Exactly
People
right.
who need to make
Yeah.
a decent living are gonna be commuting somewhere else.
Yes, absolutely.
So like that kind of housing for those kinds of people maybe could be on the fringes of the boundary of Madison County, because they need to commute.
Commuter house.
Well,
There you go.
yeah, I kind of get back to the whole sort of, providing options or meeting some unmet needs. Doesn't, and talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean that, Madison is become green. As a matter of fact, I think the data suggests that we're growing, but very slowly. And we do know that we're aging. If we go on to the next goal, I think I can go back with some of the comments that I wrote down here.
The only one we talked about utilities, both water and sewer. Internet has to be, internet availability, high-speed internet availability has to be a component to this. That is a massive limiting factor, and there are jobs that make pretty good money out here in Madison now that people that don't know are around, but they're internet-based or off-site, and that's a big driver of housing.
How's Firefly doing?
Making good progress.
They're out there putting some cable in, I see them.
I did have a question just generally. Are there any mineral rights or mining historically or anything in Madison County? I didn't see any data.
I don't know, I don't think so. Yeah, you would own it, but I mean, there's no,
They're not separated.
It's not separate from the land.
yeah.
And all the old gold mines are empty.
And they were all large.
How about, nobody's talked about historical battlefields or anything like that, or historical preservation?
Well, I'll kind of get into the other, we're kind of, this one's just sort of on housing. Sort of overlaps, but we'll get into that. So the next goal is very general, but increase the range of affordable housing options and choices. That's kind of, again, it ties into the last goal, but I think we get a little more specific. And this is not, I like these objectives because they're pretty focused and I think easy to understand. And we can go back with the consider. I agree, probably need to.
While we're on that, we will, if we go with manufactured housing, we're going to have to go in and change what we have in our definitions in our zoning ordinance. Because our definition, I looked it up today just to be sure, our definition for manufactured housing is specifically because it requires a permanent frame.
Right.
They're referring to single wide or double wide.
Right, as well.
And then we have the term modular housing. But that's also very specific. It means that you ship in a module and put it together. And there are other kinds of manufactured housing, so we may want to, before we put this in our comprehensive plan, we may think about the definitions.
Yeah, we can look at it here in a minute.
That needs to be gone into a little further, because you've got hybrid kind of things. You've got model frames now, which much more resemble the manufactured homes, but they're built to local codes.
Yeah.
And so some of that stuff's gonna have to be addressed, or you're gonna have to end up in a gray area somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And for the future, we don't want
we
to
can
have.
talk later, I can help with that.
You can identify it by the code it's built under, and that's a much cleaner approach.
Okay, fair. Expertise as well. Yes. Yeah.
So,
I know that there's log cabin houses that are basically kits. I see them going down the road on trailer trucks. They've got panels that are pre-built and they put them together. Those have to be codes and stuff. But if we have to have some terminology that deals with all of that. If we're going to talk about manufactured housing. Because it's changed over the years. It's gone from trailers to mobile homes to manufactured housing, and now there's a whole 3 or 4 other new classes of these things. They are manufactured housing, that's true, but there's so many categories. If we can find a code or some way of putting that in as the kinds of things.
Wouldn't that fall more under the building department?
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that,
Use the code as a definition of how you're approaching the house. You don't legislate or dictate code, but you can say, okay, if it's built under the HUD code, it's a house trailer. If it's built under the Virginia VRC, it's a house, whether it's made in Salem, Virginia, or Madison, Virginia. That's you just pick the code it's built under, and then that defines it.
It's the most direct way of doing that.
Yeah. Right now, manufactured homes are allowed, there are requirements, they have to be on a permanent foundation, that kind of thing. But right now, that's all we have, as far as I know, in the building, or in the zone, out of the building company. But that's, for future.
yeah, well, I just took a note on that. So I think that this goal is a goal that's admirable, and I think it's something that most comp plans probably say something like that. I think these 4 objectives are pretty good. On the manufactured housing, I would just say that, and I know Alan brought it up last time, a fair amount of places require special use permits and do not allow manufactured housing in certain districts. I think we're already sort of much more open-minded, or whatever we're going to call it. We don't, unless it's some covenant or something. And of course, manufactured housing has changed quite a bit significantly in the last decade. So potential strategies, I think these are good, and these came from me and the computer. And I liked this one. I know we had a special use permit before for a co-housing type situation. And we do have one that was, we got a special use permit several years ago. I think that's a great model. We don't really have to change anything. It'd just be if something like this were to come before the board, like, hey, it's in a comp plan, this is something that we support. There was one approved in Beautiful Run a few years ago. I was sort of thinking Craigsville School on this one. I won't say that word too often, but here.
The millennial.
Yeah. Adopt consider that ADU ordinance, which I think, just my humble opinion, I think it would sort of meet that sort of demand and give an option, an excellent option without increasing density considerably, and it would sort of, I I'm in a situation in Luray where we're going to adopt I'm on the council there, and we're going to adopt us a damn ADU ordinance. So, a little difference in towns, but,
People who are actually doing the short-term rental.
yeah.
And that they have contradicted something that we were thinking of the fact when we were looking at the ADU. We were thinking that long-term rentals were a better option for property value, et cetera, because we had read Peter and found it.
Right.
And we're getting the exact opposite advice.
And you're
We
gonna
have
keep
people saying
getting,
short-term rentals are far better for the people who own the land.
they're better for the economy too.
As long as you guys continue to allow them to be there, they contribute an awful lot. But if the ordinance ever changes and they were not allowed to be there, I'd say then that certainly would change the strategy. But that depends on where we are at this moment in time and what the rules are.
So,
That's why you need flexibility.
yeah, my thought on when we looked at the ADU, we've almost got an ordinance, we've got an ordinance basically written that could be adopted, but the idea was, we had this need, and I think Cardi and I were on the same page, and we have this sort of, everyone agrees, the need for the rental housing. If you were going to, if you have that 6 acres, you want to do that second house as a rental, hey, a short-term rental, go for it. But if you're coming in requesting that 3 to 5 acres, and you're looking to put that second dwelling on it, and you meet whatever requirements, usually there's a size requirement, several things like that. My thought was, and the people who have expressed interest to the county in doing that, and we got 3 or 4, have been specifically for a family member. So that was the idea behind making it a rental, not a short-term rental, but a long-term rental. If we're going to, extend this into A1 or C1 as a special use permit, then by extending this, then you would then not just turn around and say, hey, look, I'm going to build this 900 square foot bungalow back here, and we're going to have people coming for the weekend. That was sort of my thought, that it would help to meet that demand. I mean, I believe we did extend it to as a short-term rental. I think we have a lot more people interested in it to do it as a short-term rental. You wouldn't see nearly as many people coming in to say, look, this is for grandmother or my daughter who just moved back. I think you would see more folks who say, hey, we're going to build a cabin back here and we're going to rent it out. It's not a bad thing, I just think it doesn't meet a need. What's that? I don't think there's anything wrong with it, I just don't think it meets the need, from a policy perspective, if I'm on the board, I don't think it meets a need.
I don't think we've established a need yet. You don't have the numbers. And you dictating to a property owner what they can do with their property, you're treading on thin ice.
Well, that's what zoning ordinance is about. I mean, that's,
But you're still treading on thin ice. And do not enhance your property by limiting the use of something like that. In fact, there are plenty of small units like that in the county already that are incredibly attractive. And it helps the property owner with their income. I just don't get your objection to that. Why?
Well, I wasn't objected, just recommendation. I don't have a, vote on it, but I would say, I would recommend that, surely, you don't have to have that restriction, but I would
allow any use.
Right.
In terms of any kind of inhabitant, unless it's a kennel, well, maybe even that. But I wouldn't restrict the use of it at all.
So on the manufactured housing here, I just think this is, the state code says to, sort of discuss manufactured housing. I think we already just continue our policy. I think that's a, that we're not.
That's fair.
Right. And
all these other things are considered conventional housing. They meet this parameter.
just since ADUs, is this committee, would this be something that the committee, as people who are here and people on the committee, is this something that you would say this is a good idea? Would you want to stay in? And the Pacific, we don't have to necessarily put specifics on the, rental, short-term, we could just say.
Not writing
As a
ordinance
concept. As a concept, this is an endorsement. How do we feel as a committee on
The
this?
sticking point, I think, the sticking point that we ran into with the ADU, kind of stopped it, was that a lot of people viewed it as a way of doubling the density on A1 property, which it would have allowed, basically. And, unless we decide that that needs to be changed, as originally proposed, the ADU would have had the effect of allowing a second dwelling on less than 6 acres. So, the ADU, other than that, any other, if you've got 12 acres, you're perfectly okay to go ahead and build 3 short-term rentals, plus your original house.
One of the other things, though, if you remember, Steve, that put a kink in that somewhat was the fact that if John owned the house here, he had it for mother-in-law passed, and John wanted to move back where he come from.
Yeah.
Now, John wants to rent both houses, and the big thing was, well, John needs to be on site if he's gonna rent that ADU, and that was one of the things we could never get past. We felt like that he should be able, some of us did, that he should be able to rent both of those and not have to live there if he wanted to move somewhere else.
Correct.
Right, so it sounds like to me, we had a couple of hiccups in the ordinance, which I think we can iron out, so I say we leave ADU in there as a possibility. We're not writing ordinance here.
Yeah, right, exactly. We're not writing the ordinance, we're just sort of looking at the big, right.
Well, then why don't you change the wording to that, to just simply say, consider or explore accessory dwelling units as an alternative?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, consider adopting an ordinance, because you haven't gotten there yet. I read that ordinance.
That's good.
One of the things that keeps banging on me is ADU is an affordable dwelling unit. And they're required in some jurisdictions that you have so many normal units and then you have ADUs. So ADU here is an accessory dwelling unit. We need to be super clear about that.
What was it, repeat that again, Anthony, I'm sorry, at the very.
They're known as affordable ADUs or affordable dwelling units in a lot of places where you build apartments or townhouses and you have a certain requirement that so many of them have to be ADUs, which means you have to have reduced rent or reduced payments, and some of them to allow you to have the density in the others.
Once you define your terms.
Yeah.
So we don't want to use the abbreviations anymore.
Yeah, right.
And
But we just have to be really careful with that.
can I ask you a question? The 6-acre thing has everything to do with land use and nothing to do with anything else. In other words, if I have 6 acres or more, I can farm it and put it in land use. And so you're using that metric to make determinations about residences. And a house, if I had somebody on my property and I had 6 acres, I wouldn't want them right next door to me, but some people do have accessory rentals on their houses because their houses lend themselves to that sort of arrangement. I know of one lady in Wolftown who has just a wonderful place where people have rooms to stay and that's it, and bathrooms. So maybe you want to reconsider that 6-acre, 3-acre business as well when you start talking about this, because that has to do with farming and not much else.
It's based on the ordinances that we.
Yeah.
It's not based on.
3-acre minimum for a house.
For use. For a use.
It's 3 acres per use, but if
Per
you had
use.
6 acres, it wouldn't help you because you gotta take 1 acre out for the existing dwelling.
Correct.
Hey, Cory. With Skyline Path, do you work with low-income families, I guess? Is that what Skyline?
Yeah. Right. We're a poverty-fighting organization, yes.
Do you have a lot of single moms?
Do we have a lot of single moms? Oh, Lord, yes.
So when we're looking at these aging population, community dwelling places, I feel like me as a mom with little kids, the idea of living in a community where there's other moms, but maybe even a grandma that could like, do you know what I mean? Like, instead of just the aging population, if we're also looking at what we have here, what's already here, and what the needs are of those people, then maybe that's something that we could consider, the co-housing situation or community living or, up, down, I don't know, but I like the idea that it's not just the aging population, because we're also focusing on young families and the schools and, right?
It's all well and good, but you got to engage in that willingly.
Yeah.
I also like your idea about developing the villages, like changing the zoning and, where the rooftop should be, and, developing tighter communities and that already have.
We'll talk a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds-
Just interesting, this is in the Virginia Mercury today. There you go. I mean, just sort of funny.
So
And-
we should establish some communes like in the 60s.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I think it's fair to say this group, not writing an ordinance, but seems to want to put some language to explore. Okay, I think that's a fair. And we're moving through this one next. We'll get about half an hour left. So this co-housing for aging population, I think that's, we did have a special use permit for one. I mean, if we get something else, someone comes forward with something similar, I thought it was a really unique idea, and we did approve one, and so that's something I think.
That's the one I was referring to, that one. Like, instead of it just being for the aging population, like, there's other demographics that are here already that could probably use social connections and, a garden.
Yeah.
And community, like in a village sort of thing.
Isn't there an Aging Together program that's in place now between Madison and Rappahannock that is working on some of these issues?
We
as
need to use our
nonprofit?
Rappahannock Service Board more.
What's
Let's
that?
throw that out there, Blake.
I missed it.
All right, so we're,
Community Service Board is supposed to be helping with our aging population, and they need to do better for Madison County. But yes,
well, the last one here kind of maybe ties to that. Consider increasing the availability of supportive services for older adults. Many older adults require supportive services such as home care, meal delivery, and transportation health independently. By increasing the availability of service, I know that's sort of general, but that's what the comp plan is this doesn't necessarily speak to a specific proposal for changing zoning ordinance or anything, but just as a broad brush, if there is opportunity to support organizations or social services.
Do anything with the training for things like that?
I'm sorry, training for what?
I don't have my glasses, so I can't actually see, but I don't. It was just a thought that popped in my head. What was it?
Supportive services.
Yeah, supportive services.
Home care, meal delivery, and transportation.
No, we
I
don't.
just keep thinking it should be like this weaving thing that could happen, between people that are, I don't know, I mean, if you're a stay-at-home mom, you might be able to take an old lady to the doctor. Do you know what I'm saying? Or not a stay-at-home mom, but you like, how do I leave?
So
And
some collaborative stuff.
yeah, I have an idea for, it's an adopt a grandma program, but that's a whole different, but just like a collaboration of weaving these different pieces that like we're not really sure where to go or what to do with them, and then it's like, meal prepping, is that something that one of the organizations could supply the training, and then they kind of already have a job, because we have to take care of our vulnerable and our vulnerable. That's like our responsibility as citizens, right? That's the whole point.
How do we wrap that into what we're doing with the comprehensive plan? This seems like.
Oh, sorry, I was just, sorry.
No, just that particular, the whole thing, I don't know how we're able to do that.
There's only two ways. You can either subsidize it if you really wanted to do it, or simply when somebody asks, you agree to say yes when somebody wants to do something.
There we go.
They need a permit. That's the only two things you can really do.
That's right.
Some of those services already exist.
Yeah, I mean, again,
Because the role of government,
Community
that's all you
Services
can
has a
do.
senior center.
Is
they
it a
go around
comp
and
plan
pick up
issue or
seniors.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer by Alan, is that,
Support the event.
right, we're supporting, yeah, support,
Yeah, and then,
Not that it's in the comprehensive plan, but we support it.
right. So I'll say support increasing the availability. I'll just take a note for myself, so. I can't spell.
We won't judge you.
All right, so this last one, and I think we're doing okay if we can make it through here. I don't know if this goal could be, consider the recognized interconnectedness between housing, economic condition of the county, both public and private sectors, tourism attraction, and agricultural activities. Sort of taking a lot of things we talked about and rolling it again to another objective. Seek collaborative partnerships with the town of Madison. Consider forming a housing committee to include various stakeholders.
Could you back up to the very beginning there? Instead of consider and recognize, supposing you just say promote the interconnectedness between housing and economic, because that really
Yeah, I like that. Mhm.
says a lot.
Now,
And can I ask you a question? What's the difference between a pocket and a cluster?
I think they're kind of interchangeable words.
a pocket would be on a brown fields where you'd have a small pocket that's in the middle of other things where you develop them in the brown field or something like that. And a cluster is where you take a group and put it together, preserving things around it to create the density for the cluster.
Thank you.
So here are some strategies. I mean, the first one, encourage use of green spaces, natural drainage system, and sustainable building practice. I mean, we kind of already do that in our building code, in our land disturbance policies. Here, consider conducting, just a thought, and we can say consider, we can maybe use a different word, conducting a semi-annual roundtable meeting of housing service providers to discuss issues, challenges, and ideas for promoting a mixture of housing options. You know, get the different folks in the county, realtors, and Skyline, CAP, Habitat, different people that might want to do something on an annual, semi-annual basis. I don't think that would hurt. The last one, just a strategy, is consider private partnerships and for promote the development of affordable housing. The low-income housing tax credit, that was what the potential project there behind Food Lion was looking at doing. Again, if something like that were to come before the board, I mean, I don't think consider is the right word, but just, again, if we do get a proposal of a housing tax credit project, that'd be something that...
Encourage.
Yeah, encourage might be a better word.
Megan, another word, another approach on these sentences that start with consider doing something. Take the middle one, for example. Can you put that one back? Just conduct a semi-annual. Take out consider doing it.
Yep.
As long as recommended.
And I would suggest that throughout, rather than consider doing something, it doesn't leave you.
Right.
You haven't gone very far when you just say.
Right, I think that's it. The idea is that some of these are going to be actionable things that you can do. Some of the things are going to be things like, Alan said, if they come to before you, that, hey, look, this is supported in the comp plan, so.
I think it's going to be important if you consider these roundtables that with the information that you get, that you're willing to come up with some sort of action plan or how to address that, not just to be meeting, but really wanting to make it better or work towards closing the barriers and gaps.
Your best way to do that is to go with the private organizations that are around and try to go through them. And then when they want to do something, you let the folks here approve it. But if you really want to get that stuff done, it doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
It happens out there.
Yeah.
Lincoln, may I suggest a simple sentence that I'll just read it and see what you think. Meet with existing and potential Madison County employers to better understand their labor force needs, their remuneration policies, and the significance to them of Madison County-based workers at all levels.
Say that one more time.
You want that language understood?
Just send it to me. Send that to me. Okay, that's good. All right, I think we can,
Who's gonna meet with them, Peter?
Peter's gonna meet with them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'd be interested. So, look, consider land use and housing policy that enables context-appropriate economic development and resiliency. What, was that AI or?
yeah, that was the one, I'm not really, context appropriate. I think resiliency right here really kind of goes into this. This is probably a better, I would swap this and that, sort of. I think what I'm going to do is I go back to rewrite these. I'm going to merge some of these together into a better, context appropriate is a.
I think that's a very good term. Now,
What does it mean?
context appropriate, meaning if you knew what the county's mission was economically, the and the geology or the terrain, of the county, that's your context, okay? And if you knew what your mission, your county mission was economically, then that was your context.
Okay, correct context.
Get rid of context. But it's not a big deal.
Well, I mean, again, we're not a community that's we're not here grappling about, we're not Loudoun County. We're not working about, massive new neighborhoods, context appropriate. We're looking at small little niche things that can maybe, when it comes to affordable housing, different things that could maybe improve the situation. But, so maybe that's kind of.
It'd be nice if they could work together.
Maybe context appropriate is not quite the right word for that, but you're appropriate for the conditions in the county, maybe.
Right.
Some way to say that.
Okay. Good. All right, I think I can kind of retool these and send it out to you next few days or weeks. You can look at it and get everybody. It's not easy. There's a lot of overlap, and some, like I said, some of the things we could, we as the board or plan commission can do things directly. Some things we're gonna have to wait and see what comes to us. I'll go over quick. We'll do the land use. This is going to be the next one, and it's going to have several elements, sort of subtopics in land use, environment, community design. Could go a lot of different ways on this, and we'll just kind of give you a little introduction tonight. And I just said right here, note this plan elements a combination, consolidation of the proposed land use and environment and community design built environment. So I just sort of combined those two into this one. I did this the other day just as a, just to kind of understand our land use, and at least from a zoning perspective. Zoning is not always what is, you can have a piece of land zoned business that's being used for ag. So remember, it doesn't always mean that that parcel is in use as a active business, for instance, or industrial site. It just means that's what it's zoned for, potentially could. We got an area of 322 square miles. That's 206 acres. We got a population density of 43 per square mile. This took a while yesterday. I went through our GIS map, and I think these numbers are pretty close. We're going up or down a few acres either way. That's where I kind of use the approximate sign. But if you look at our zoning, just for if you haven't seen a zoning map, well, you kind of have the west side of the county. That's conservation. It's about 115 square miles of that 300, or 73,000 acres, a little under 74,000 acres. That includes Shenandoah National Park is some conservation, minimum lot size of 10 acres. That's the big sort of take on that one. Ag, a little over 200 square miles, or 128,000 acres. R1 limited, and you can see a big drop right here, about 3,200 acres, about 5 square miles. And then the other, you got about maybe a little under a square mile of business, 480 acres. The M1 or M2, looking at, about 128 acres. The other R2 or R3, 46 acres. So, and again, could be off a little bit, but I think it's pretty good. Here.
Email that to us.
Yeah, yes, I'm going to send this whole thing to you at some point, definitely.
How much is in the park? Because we don't have any control over that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say of that 73,000 acres, I would say at least half of that's park. So they're kind of a useless pie chart, but agriculture, the other ones don't even really make a little blip on there. So now this came from the comp plan last time, but this is a good map. It pretty much shows you that this is your prime ag. It's 29 almost. This is the prime as far as farming, planting, growing. I assume doesn't mean this doesn't have some ag value, but maybe not in the sense that. Of course, I think we learned that most of our cash crops are poultry, cattle. So, but again, you can kind of see this is down here and around Woodbury. It looks like there's a really excellent. That's probably looks like to be the best sort of farm as far as cultivating crops would be. So.
No. I need to do rock climbing at my end of the county.
Yeah, rock climbing. And then, this comes in the 28 comp plan, slopes, we go down, it's a Blue Ridge to the Piedmont, valley to the Piedmont, so.
That's what makes it conservation, is the terrain.
Sure, right. Flood zone, just came straight from the GIS map. You can build a flood zone. You just have to meet certain criteria. But just as informational, there are some issues there with any significant type of development in flood zone areas. And we've learned that over the years. And we'll kind of finish up here. This is from the land use plan. Nothing wrong with this. I think it's fine. So this would be the growth areas. But I did sort of focus here, just sort of blew these up, and you can see there's a sewer treatment plant, the ST. And here's the zoning around, I guess, what I consider the most significant growth area. You can see the zoning. R1 is residential, which is a 1.5 acre lot. A 1 acre lot if you're on water and sewer. So you can see this kind of large swath of land here on Fishback. Here's an aerial view of this. Kind of look at this, if you look, it's hard to tell maybe, but if you look at this and zoom in all through here, you can see most of this is undeveloped, right through here. And there's a sewer plant right in here, the existing sewer plant. Got a river right there, so everything would kind of come to this drain down to here. These lines aren't real dark, but you can see here's Gate Road, if you remember our zoning map, this is all zoned residential, this is agriculture, but that's R3. This is all R1. If you come down, I don't know why I put this little thing on here, but you can see, I just sort of, as compared to what we did back in 18, I just think a more compact development area, about 850 acres. I mean, talking about 100 years of growth, I mean, that right there, that area, as far as any real density, just in my humble opinion, would be the most appropriate place. You know, if the sewer plant is upgraded to where it could handle more capacity, I really feel like this area right here, it's all undeveloped, is, and of course, right here, if you see my cursor, that is rezoned for potential apartments. So that, to me, this area sort of seems like the most natural. You know, the one that was done in 18 was more broad brush. I mean, sure, there's, you know, it kind of catches everything, but I think it could be more compact to actually include these lands there. So,
When you use the term land use planning, is that the equivalent of zoning?
So yeah, I see land use and zoning, not necessarily. I think land use and zoning can sometimes be different. Like, you know, you could have a parcel that's zoned business that's being farmed. There's a connection. I don't know if I'm really answering your question very well, but yes and no.
Take out the zoning and just, how would you define for these purposes?
Yeah, land use. Yeah, for land use planning, how we envision the future development pattern in the county, which ultimately takes, you know, all human activity takes place on land. So where we see future land development growth, whether it be commercial, residential. That's a good answer.
Leaving with this section be an appropriate place to consider revisiting the 329 corridor study, which is getting kind of long in the tooth now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, yeah, on this section, I think we definitely will need to, yeah, that's a good point. Talk about the 29 corridor.
Because that coincides with
Right.
the development area that you're looking at, assuming that the sewage plant is updated.
Right.
Most of that area off
So-
Fishback Road is within a mile.
We'll get a couple more minutes, just sort of broad thoughts. I know it's the first time you've looked at it. I mean, just sort of broad thoughts about, I mean, as far as a dense growth area, which again, understanding the demand, it could change. We never know. I mean, we could, but if we were to see, a need for increased housing, residential, to accommodate future growth, which again could be 100 years. I mean, really could. Maybe 850 acres, when you consider the growth of the county, I mean, this would probably be an area that could accommodate any potential growth for many, many years. What is your, just, again, we'll talk about this in the next meeting, but general feedback with this? Anthony, I know you got some thoughts on that.
Well, without infrastructure, nothing's going to happen with it.
Right, and this is kind of assuming that the infrastructure
Will
be there. Right,
That's a big assumption.
that's right.
I don't know that it needs to be captured. It needs to be captured along these lines, and the village concept is good, and around the town of Madison is really good. But I think there are other nearby areas that are candidates as well. Without getting out and crushing, there's a good area, but look outside of that at what's already developed. That's Malvern. That's Malvern. And if you look at the Berry property, it's already developed, but it's all in farmland. But whoever did that did a beautiful job. And it's all cut up in farmland. You just have to be able to afford, if they ever sell it, to put a state road in it. you know, but it's beautiful. There's so much stuff that's done well, you know, that would fit in along those areas.
If I'm not mistaken, I think all of Malvern is zone A1.
Right, and of course, that was all platted, probably before zoning, right? That was all before.
Trust
You just kind of went down to the courthouse and recorded your survey back in the day, and that was it, you know?
That Fishback Road there?
This is Fishback right here.
Yeah, so that would end up being widened maybe if you had a bunch of houses in there.
You know, depending on, at some point, if it really grew, you know, right, if it ever got to the point where, but I would say, not in the short term, but, you know, like Mr. O'Bannon, I mean, you know, we proved that a couple of years ago. You know, right.
Isn't there a big piece of B1 going out 231, the left-hand side of Plum Hearth? Like 300-foot wide strip out through there? That used to be Buffalo Hill.
Except they made 231 a scenic byway now, so that might influence.
Less 230.
230, I mean, from Sheets to Wolftown. I was talking about that. You know,
Would that
might
affect the
influence
B1
what you
zone?
can do.
I don't see how it could.
Here's the B1 for us Madison, you can see it all kind of comes down along the highway to Orange Road. All right, so I'll work through this one a little more, and, you know, we'll look at that the next meeting and get something out to you. We'll get a draft of, where are we at here? We'll get a draft of the housing, take these notes I've taken and try to work something up for this, and then we'll go into more depth on this one with several other topics covered, and we'll talk through this one.
At the next. Said you're considering a housing study, who's gonna pay for that?
Where was that one at?
That's down below these maps. I just don't see Madison doing a housing study.
Well, that was in the old comp plan, so presumably it was already paid for.
Right, which is why it never happened.
You gonna sponsor that, Ann?
No. Thanks for asking us.
Never know until you ask.
All righty, well, the next meeting is going to be, April 14th? 13th. Thursday the 13th, and it looks like that would be 5:30. But I will get that email out. So, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
April 13th.
April 13th.
Tuesday, Thursday. I'll be in the car at 5 o'clock.
Hey, we got a good employee starting Monday.
What's that?
I heard you stole it from me.
Yeah, I asked you, I said, what happened to this?
Yeah.
All of a sudden became like
Yeah.
So I loved, yeah, that's what and they don't really I would put like if I was a person. It's a map that
Right. Yeah, we have the GIS system's really good here.
We have the link exclusive for me to set it
Right.
woodland, open land, and then roads and all that.
Right. Yeah, the Madison's,
See like density really clearly, how it's carved out already.
right, no, I think that, oh, no, it's,
Exactly. Bluetooth has really helped out.
Not me.
They fall.
So you have one car. Okay.
How are you, young man?
Always will.
Always, well, you're late.
Always.
I know.
How are you, Blair?
Hey, Lincoln, do you have, or does the county have,
It's a process.
overlaid on?
No, we don't, I
Oh, yeah.
Roads are the roads.
As far as the properties. I don't have any expectations about like that.
Well,
I think that's some good ones.
I mean, this is the forum, it's just they might have some conservation different subject.
That's what I mean. Oh, that's what I mean.
That makes sense.
But you know, it's getting, it's, I hope I didn't offend you by saying young lady.
No, that,
I'm sorry if I did.
no, Mr. Worth, that's fine.
It's a pretty open conversation. Yeah, I mean, if the UC Outdoor Foundation, the Outdoor Foundation,
Saying stuff,
they provided the
you know.
parcel data. These folks,
Well, we were just talking about.
Is that one of your layers?
I mean, we don't have it on there, but I mean, it's whoever holds these.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, I didn't consider that.
Yeah,
Oh,
we-
I didn't
we
consider
could
that.
probably-
It changes my mind too.
I don't know how the interface works.
I know I've seen that map. It's pretty.
Yeah.
Didn't that have a real
It's hard, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And I did miss Mr. Howell, who I talked on the phone.
See you later, thank you.
Take care.
Hi, I'm Peter Rush.
Hey, I signed up for your conference like 2 seconds after you said it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, no, that sounds cool, yeah.
See you.